She lost her sight in one terrible moment, and with it, her reason to live. But on a stormy night, when the wind howled like her own grief, a wounded husky appeared at her door. And what happened next would change both of their lives forever. Before we begin, tell us, where are you watching from today? And if this story touches your heart, don't forget to subscribe, because what comes next will stay with you long after the screen fades to black. The rain came down in silver sheets that night, blurring the lights of the highway into trembling veins of gold. Claire Monroe had always loved driving after dark, the hum of the tires, the soft rhythm of wipers across glass, the faint music from the radio that played like a heartbeat under her laughter. But that night was different. The air smelled of metal and ozone. Her fiancé, Ethan, kept one hand on the wheel and the other resting over hers, the diamond ring catching flashes of lightning as it danced across her fingers. They were halfway down the mountain road when the world tore open. A flash, blinding white. Tires screamed, metal twisted, glass shattered. Then nothing. When Claire woke, the world was quiet in a way that felt wrong. The air was thick with the sterile scent of hospitals, the hiss of oxygen, the murmur of machines breathing for someone else. Somewhere close, a voice said softly, "She's awake." Her throat burned. Her fingers reached for light, for something familiar, but her world stayed black. "It's dark," she whispered. "Why is it dark?" No one answered right away. Then a doctor's voice came, careful and low. "Claire, your eyes were injured in the accident. We did everything we could, but—" The rest of the sentence dissolved into the sound of her pulse roaring in her ears. Ethan was gone. The music was gone. The light was gone. In that moment, something inside her broke in a way that could never be repaired. 3 weeks later, the hospital let her go, not because she was healed, but because there was nothing more they could do. They said she needed time to adjust, as if blindness was a bruise that would fade. She returned to the only place left, her parents' old farmhouse in the foothills of Colorado. The place smelled like dust and silence. Her mother had died years earlier. Her father's tools still hung on the wall of the barn, like ghosts waiting for hands that would never use them again. The neighbors had long since moved away. The fields were brown and stiff with frost. The only sounds were the crows and the slow moan of wind through the broken fence posts. Inside, the piano stood where it always had, under the window that looked toward the mountains. Claire reached for it, her fingers brushing the cold ivory keys. Once those keys had been her voice, her freedom. She had filled concert halls with her music, her name printed on glossy programs beside Ethan's. He played cello. She played life itself. Now her hands shook when she touched them. Her fingers pressed a single note, a hollow C that rang through the empty house and died almost instantly. That was when she stopped playing. And slowly, she stopped speaking. Days blurred into nights without meaning. She memorized the shape of the house through touch. 13 steps from the door to the kitchen, 7 to the window, 4 to the couch. She lived like a ghost tracing the outlines of a world she no longer belonged to. Her therapist called every week. Claire never picked up. The answering machine was full of voices that meant well, but said nothing she needed to hear. "You're strong, Claire. You'll find new purpose." Ethan would want you to keep living. But what if she didn't want to? Sometimes in the heavy silence of midnight, she whispered into the dark, "If there's anything left out there, anything worth saving, show me." No one ever answered, until one night something did. It was past midnight when she first heard it, a sound sharp enough to pierce the storm outside. A howl, long, distant, trembling with pain. She froze. The wind howled through the eaves. Thunder rolled across the hills. But this sound was different, desperate, human in its sorrow. A whimper followed, faint and broken. Her heart hammered. She told herself it was nothing. The storm, a trick of wind, her imagination. But then she heard it again, louder, closer. Without thinking, she stood. Her bare feet found the cold wood floor. She fumbled for her cane, then stopped. There wasn't time. Her hands slid across the wall until she found the door. The wind tore it open, slamming rain into her face. "Hello?" she called out, her voice trembling. Is someone there? Another whimper, low, guttural, not human. She took one careful step onto the porch, then another, her hands stretched in front of her. Her world was all sound now. The hiss of rain, the creak of the old swing, the quick, shallow breathing of something alive. Then she touched it, wet fur shivering under her fingers, and the sticky warmth of blood. Oh my God! The creature jerked weakly, but didn't pull away. She felt the tremor of its heart, the slickness of its coat. A dog. Big, strong once, maybe beautiful once, now broken. She knelt in the mud, whispering to it as if to a child. It's okay. You're safe now. The dog gave a low, cracked whine, then slumped against her knees. With every ounce of strength, she lifted it, heavy, limp, and staggered back inside, her clothes soaked and hands trembling. The creature's breath came shallow, labored. She dragged it toward the fireplace, threw in wood by feel, and struck a match until the room glowed faintly orange. Blood pooled on the rug. The animal's fur was streaked with burns and gashes. Claire found an old blanket, pressed it against the wound, whispering, "Please don't die. Please." The dog's body twitched, then stilled, its eyes barely open, pale blue like ice. When the fire crackled to life, she saw it clearly for the first time, even without sight. She saw it through sound, through warmth, through the trembling heartbeat she could feel under her palm. She stayed awake the whole night, listening to that heartbeat, counting every breath. It was the first sound that didn't remind her of loss. By dawn, the storm had passed. Light spilled through the cracks in the boarded windows, faint but real. The dog still breathed, weakly, stubbornly, as if it refused to let go. Claire sat beside him, her hand resting on his chest, whispering softly, "If you survive this, maybe I can too." For the first time in months, she didn't feel entirely alone. Outside, the snow began to fall, slow, silent, endless. Inside, for the first time since the accident, Claire felt the warmth of something she'd thought was gone forever. Hope. And as the firelight flickered across the room, she gave the dying dog a name. "Balto," she said quietly. "You're Balto." The dog's tail moved, just once, a faint thump against the floor, enough to make her smile through her tears. That night, as the storm clouds cleared and the stars returned over the frozen valley, Claire slept for the first time without dreaming of headlights or screams, because in the quiet beside her, a heart still beat, steady, fragile, alive. And somewhere in that darkness, something deep inside her whispered, "The world hasn't taken everything, not yet." The morning light crept slowly across the walls, thin and colorless through the boarded windows. Claire sat on the cold floor beside the fireplace, her back against the wall, the blanket wrapped around her shoulders. She could hear the fire's soft hiss and the steady, ragged sound of breathing beside her. The dog was still alive. Against all logic, all reason, he had made it through the night. She reached out, her hand trembling slightly until it brushed warm fur. The dog flinched, a faint whimper escaping its throat. "Easy," she whispered. "You're okay. I'm here." The words felt strange. "I'm here." She hadn't said them to anyone since the accident. For a long time, she hadn't known if she was here at all. But the dog stirred at her voice, as if it understood. It was enough. She took a deep breath and reached for the phone. The numbers on the keypad were memorized from before, muscle memory replacing sight. She called the local vet clinic, her voice quiet and shaky. "I found a dog. He's hurt badly. I can't drive." The woman on the line hesitated, then said gently, "We'll send someone. Just keep him warm, okay?" Claire hung up and sat back down beside the dog, whispering to him in the silence. "You're not allowed to die. You hear me?" When the vet arrived an hour later, the house smelled of wood smoke and wet fur. The man's boots thudded against the floorboards. "You weren't kidding," he murmured, kneeling down. Claire heard the sound of gloves snapping on, the rustle of gauze. "He's a husky, big one. Looks like he's been through hell. Bullet grazed his side, legs fractured. Someone did this to him." Claire swallowed. Can you save him? The vet hesitated. I'll try, but even if he makes it, that leg won't ever be the same. She reached out, her hand finding the dog's head. His fur was rough and cold beneath her fingers. Then we'll both learn how to walk again, she said softly. The vet paused, then nodded. He's got a fighter's heart. You do too, I think. When he left, he promised to return in a few days to check the wounds. He gave her a list of things to do. Clean the gash, keep the bandages dry, make sure he eats. Simple orders, but they gave her something she hadn't had in months. Purpose. By evening, Claire had named him Balto. The name came naturally, as if it had waited for this moment. Her father had told her the story once. The dog who braved a frozen wilderness to deliver medicine and save lives, a hero with ice in his veins and fire in his heart. She'd never forgotten it. She said the name aloud now, letting it roll off her tongue like a prayer. Balto. The dog's ear twitched. That's you, she whispered. The one who doesn't give up. For days they healed together. Balto slept by the fire, breathing in slow, pained rhythms. Claire learned the sounds of his world. The gentle tap of his nails on the wood floor, the soft click of his jaws when he drank water, the low rumble of his growl when the wind pressed too hard against the house. She found herself talking to him constantly, about the accident, about Ethan, about the lights she could still remember, even if she could never see it again. She told him about the music she used to play, how she missed the feeling of ivory beneath her fingers. He never answered, of course, but sometimes when she fell silent, he would shift closer and lay his head across her knees. His warmth said what words couldn't. The world outside the farmhouse began to change. Snow thickened on the fences, the river froze, and days slipped by unnoticed. Claire started to rise earlier, her hands learning the house anew, where the edges of furniture were, the distance between rooms, the steps leading to the porch. Balto followed her everywhere. When she bumped into something, he would nudge her away from it. When she reached for the wrong shelf, he would bark once, sharp and precise, until she corrected her path. Without meaning to, she began to rely on him, and he, in turn, began to rely on her. One afternoon, while she was replacing his bandage, he whimpered, trying to lick her hand. His eyes, though she couldn't see them, felt fixed on her. I know, she said softly, smiling through her tears. It hurts, but we're still here, right? The next morning when she woke, she found him standing at the doorway for the first time, unsteady but upright. You're walking, she breathed, laughing despite herself. Balto, you're actually... The sentence caught in her throat as he took 2 limping steps and collapsed into her lap. She hugged him tightly, her laughter breaking into sobs. Something inside her shifted that day, a crack of light through the darkness. She wasn't healed. Neither was he, but together they were less broken. One evening, Claire sat by the piano again. Balto lay beside her feet, his breathing steady and calm. She hadn't touched the keys since before the accident. She let her fingers rest on them now, feeling the smooth, cool surface beneath her skin. She pressed one note, then another. The sound echoed softly through the room, hesitant, fragile, but alive. Balto lifted his head, ears twitching. When she struck a third note, he made a sound, a low, mournful howl that harmonized with the piano's trembling tone. Claire froze, then laughed through her tears. You're singing with me. She played again, slowly at first, her movements unsure but deliberate. Each note became a word she could no longer speak. Balto's voice filled the spaces between them, and for the first time since she'd lost her sight, the house didn't feel empty. The days grew longer. Snow turned to slush. The wind softened. Life returned in small, quiet ways. But one evening, as the sun faded behind the mountains, Balto's ears pricked. He stood suddenly, body rigid. What is it? Claire asked, her hands searching the air until it found his fur. He didn't move. A low growl rumbled in his chest. Then a knock, 3 sharp raps against the door. Claire's stomach tightened. No one ever came this far up the hill. Who's there? She called, her voice trembling. A man's voice answered, smooth but strange. Evening, ma'am. Sorry to bother you. I'm from the real estate office down in town. Heard this property might be for sale soon. It's not, she said quickly. Please go. There was a pause, too long. I see. You living out here alone? Balto snarled, the sound deep and guttural. The man chuckled, a low, ugly sound. Nice dog. Keep him close. Footsteps retreated into the snow. Then silence. Claire stood there for a long time, her hand gripping Balto's collar, feeling the tremor in his muscles. It's okay, she whispered, but her own heart was pounding. After a while, she sat on the couch, still holding him. He's gone, she murmured, though she wasn't sure if she believed it. Outside, the wind had died, but the air felt heavier, as if the storm that had brought Balto to her door was not over, only waiting. That night, she couldn't sleep. Every sound felt too close. The creak of the roof, the ticking of the clock, the whisper of the wind beneath the door. And every time she started to drift, Balto would lift his head, ears twitching toward the dark. Near midnight, she heard something else. Faint footsteps crunching through the snow outside. Slow, deliberate. Balto growled low in his throat, rising to his feet. Balto, she whispered. The sound stopped. Her breath caught. Then nothing. Just the long, deep silence of the mountains. But even after the quiet returned, she knew. Someone had been there. Someone had stood in the dark, watching. And as she reached down, her hand found Balto's fur. It was bristled and cold beneath her palm, his heart racing beneath it. For the first time since she'd lost her sight, Claire wasn't afraid of the darkness itself. She was afraid of what might be in it. She lay awake until dawn, her fingers buried in Balto's fur, listening to the only sound that could still calm her, the slow, steady rhythm of his heartbeat. It was her anchor in a world that had none. And though she couldn't see it, the faintest hint of light crept through the cracks in the boards, brushing across her face like a promise she didn't dare trust yet. The storm rolled in without warning. By afternoon, the sun had vanished behind thick gray clouds that pressed low over the mountains. Wind clawed at the windows, bending the pines outside until they moaned like restless ghosts. The air grew colder, sharper, until the walls of the old farmhouse seemed to breathe with each gust. Claire stood by the window, one hand on the cold glass, listening to the storm build. The wind's voice had become familiar to her, but that day it carried something else, a tension, a warning. Balto paced near the door, nails tapping against the wood in anxious rhythm. You hear it too, don't you? She whispered. He gave a low bark, deep in his chest, the kind that wasn't for attention, the kind that meant danger. Claire's fingers tightened on the window frame. For the past few nights, she'd woken to the same sound. Faint footsteps in the snow, too heavy to be animals, too deliberate to be the wind. Each time she told herself it was her imagination, born from loneliness. But Balto knew better. The air inside the house was thick with unease. That evening, when the storm finally broke, it came down like a war. Wind shrieked through the chimney, flinging snow against the walls like bullets. The roof groaned under the weight of ice. The electricity flickered once, then died, leaving the house swallowed in darkness. Claire moved slowly, one hand brushing the wall, the other gripping the back of a chair for balance. It's okay, Balto, she murmured. We've been through worse. But even as she said it, she didn't believe it. Balto's low growl rolled through the dark like thunder. Then, a noise outside, a crack, wood splintering. Claire froze, her breath caught in her throat. What was that? Balto barked sharply once, then again, louder. She heard it clearly now, footsteps crunching through snow, slow and deliberate, circling the porch. Someone was out there. Her pulse thundered in her ears. She reached for her phone. Nothing. The battery had died hours ago. The door rattled. Once. Twice. Then the sound of metal scraping against the lock. Balto, she whispered, her voice trembling. Stay. But Balto didn't stay. He lunged. The door burst inward with a violent crack, wind and snow rushing in all at once. The smell of smoke and cold metal filled the room. A man's voice cursed. Rough, angry. Get back, Claire shouted, but Balto was already there, his growl turning into a savage roar. The sounds came fast, a scuffle, a shout, a cry of pain, then the heavy thud of bodies hitting the floor. Balto! The chaos lasted seconds, but it felt endless. Then came the sound that stopped her heart, a gunshot, deafening in the small room. The silence afterward was unbearable. "Balto," she whispered, crawling forward on shaking hands. The floor was cold, slick beneath her palms. Then she felt it, fur trembling under her touch, wet and sticky with blood. "No, no, no, no!" Her voice cracked. "Please, please!" He gave a faint whimper, still alive, barely. Somewhere beyond him, she heard the man stumble, cursing. He was hurt too. His breathing was labored. She froze, listening, as he dragged himself toward the door. Snow crunched again. Then, nothing. The storm swallowed him whole. Claire pressed both hands to Balto's wound. Warm blood soaked through her fingers. "Stay with me," she begged, tears mixing with the rain that blew in through the shattered door. "You saved me. Don't you dare leave me now." She didn't know how long she sat there, her hands shaking, whispering prayers she didn't remember how to believe in. The wind screamed through the house. The fire had gone out. Then faintly in the distance, sirens. The sheriff's truck arrived sometime before dawn. Claire didn't hear the tires crunch over the snow. She felt them through the trembling floorboards, through the sudden shift of cold air when the door opened. "Ma'am." The voice was cautious, edged with shock. "My God." She didn't answer. She was still sitting beside Balto, her arms around him. He was breathing, shallow but steady. "What happened here?" the sheriff asked, his boots crunching against the broken glass. "They came for him," she said quietly. Her voice sounded distant, hollow. "The men who hurt him before, they wanted him back." The sheriff's breath hitched. "We've been looking for a group like that. Dog fighters. They steal trained huskies, retrievers, use them for bets, for fights in the valley." Claire's stomach turned. "He ran from them. They found him again." The sheriff crouched beside her. "We'll take care of it. You did good, ma'am. You saved him." She almost laughed. "He saved me first." At the animal clinic, the air smelled of alcohol and clean cotton. The vet worked in silence while Claire sat nearby, her hands clenched so tightly they hurt. Each sound, the snip of scissors, the hum of machines, felt amplified in her mind. After what felt like hours, the vet finally said, "He'll make it. The bullet went through soft tissue, missed the lung. He's one hell of a fighter." Claire exhaled for the first time in what felt like days. When they let her see him, she knelt by the metal table and touched his paw. It was warm. His tail moved faintly. "You're not allowed to scare me like that again," she whispered, smiling through tears. "Do you hear me, Balto? Never again." His breathing deepened, slow and steady, like the sound of sleep after war. They returned home 2 days later. The front door was patched with plywood. The bloodstains had faded. Though Claire could still smell the iron in the air, she didn't care. The farmhouse wasn't haunted anymore. It was alive. Balto limped slowly beside her, the soft rhythm of his paws against the wood floor echoing like a heartbeat. She guided him to the hearth, lit the fire, and sat down beside him. For a long time, neither of them moved. The flames crackled, the wind sighed outside, and the storm faded into memory. "Do you know what the sheriff said?" she murmured, stroking his fur. "He said we're lucky. I think he's wrong. I think we're meant to be here." She smiled faintly. "Maybe that's not luck. Maybe it's something bigger." Balto shifted, resting his head against her lap. His body trembled, but his heartbeat was strong. She leaned down and whispered against his ear, "We're not running anymore. This is home." Over the following weeks, the snow melted into streams that ran down the hill like veins of silver. Claire rebuilt what had been broken. The vet came back often to check on Balto, impressed by how quickly he recovered. "He's got scars," the vet said one morning, running a hand over the dog's flank. "But he doesn't care. He's proud of them." "So am I," Claire said quietly. She didn't tell the vet that she had nightmares sometimes, of footsteps crunching through the snow, of glass breaking, of blood on her hands. But whenever she woke, sweating and shaking, Balto would be there, pressing his nose against her face until her breathing steadied. She didn't need sight to know he was watching over her. Spring came slowly to the mountains. Grass pushed through thawed soil, and the river began to sing again. Claire spent her mornings sitting on the porch, feeling the sun on her face while Balto lay at her feet. She could hear birds again, could smell pine and wet earth, could feel life stirring all around her. But she also knew peace was fragile. Every sound, every whisper of wind still made her pulse quicken, a reminder of how close death had come. And yet, she wasn't afraid anymore, because when she reached out her hand, she always found him there. One night, as the last light of dusk faded behind the peaks, Claire sat on the porch, Balto beside her, both of them listening to the stillness. "Do you remember that first night?" she said softly. "When I found you in the storm? I thought you were a ghost. Maybe you were. Maybe you came to remind me that the world isn't all darkness." Balto gave a low, contented sigh, pressing closer. "You showed me that even broken things can protect what they love," she continued, "even in the dark." The stars began to emerge, faint and distant, but she could feel them. Not see, but feel. The world around her pulsed with quiet life, the rustle of trees, the beat of her heart, the steady rhythm of Balto's breath. She smiled. "You can rest now, boy. You've done enough." Balto's tail thumped once against the wood, a soft promise that he wasn't going anywhere. But deep inside, Claire knew the peace they'd found wouldn't last forever. The world had a way of testing what you love most. And sometimes the light you hold on to comes only after you've walked through blood and snow. Outside, the night wind whispered through the trees, calm for now, but carrying with it the echo of storms yet to come. Inside, beside the fire, two souls slept, scarred, bound, and still breathing, alive. Morning came softly that spring, not in blinding brightness, but in warmth that seeped through the cracks of the old farmhouse like a promise whispered by the sun. Claire woke to the quiet rhythm of Balto's breathing beside her bed, a deep, steady pulse that had become her alarm clock, her anchor, her comfort. Every day since the attack had been a fight, for peace, for trust, for meaning. She had learned to live by the sounds of the world again, the creak of the porch when the wind shifted, the hum of the kettle when water began to sing, the distant bark of dogs carried through the valley. But the sound she loved most was the one lying next to her now, the faint huff of breath, the gentle sigh that said, "We made it through another night." Balto stirred when she reached out and touched him. His fur was rougher now, marked by scars. He no longer ran as he once did. His front paw dragged a little when he walked, a reminder of the night he almost died. But his spirit, that fierce, silent fire, had only grown stronger. "Good morning, warrior," Claire whispered, smiling as his nose pressed into her hand. She rose carefully, her feet finding the cold floorboards. The air smelled of wet earth and pine. Spring had finally conquered the snow. She could hear the river again, swelling with meltwater. Somewhere in that sound was the pulse of life itself, distant but alive. In the weeks that followed, Claire's world expanded in small, careful steps. She started walking the trail behind the house again, her hand resting lightly on Balto's back. He had become her guide in every sense. One bark meant turn left, two barks meant stop. When he pressed his body against her leg, it meant danger. The first time they reached the hill where she and Ethan used to watch the sunset, Claire almost turned back. She could feel the air open up, the emptiness of the view she could no longer see, the same view where her life had broken apart. But Balto sat beside her, silent and patient, his warmth pressing against her side. She lifted her face toward the wind and whispered, "I can't see it, but I know it's beautiful." Somewhere deep inside her chest, something began to unclench. One afternoon, Dr. Avery, her rehabilitation specialist, drove up the mountain road to see her. The sound of tires on gravel, the soft slam of a car door, the familiar rhythm of heels on the porch. It all reached her before the voice did. "Claire," the doctor said with a smile she couldn't see but could hear, "I have news. There's a clinical trial, experimental surgery. It's risky, but it could restore partial vision." Claire froze. For a long moment, she said nothing. The thought of seeing again was almost unbearable, like reaching for something that used to be hers, something the universe had already taken back. Balto, sensing her tension, pressed his nose into her palm. Dr. Avery continued, It won't be perfect, and it may not last, but you qualify. I thought you'd want to know. After the doctor left, Claire sat by the fire for hours thinking. Her fingers moved over Balto's scars. The world around her was built of sound and memory, and she wasn't sure she wanted to change that. Sight might bring light back, but it might also bring pain. Finally, she whispered, "What do you think, Balto? Should I try?" Balto answered the only way he knew, with a soft lick against her hand. She laughed quietly. "Yeah, I thought you'd say that." The surgery took place 3 weeks later in Denver. The hospital felt cold and unfamiliar. Too many beeping machines, too many voices speaking words she couldn't trust. But when they wheeled her into the operating room, she imagined Balto waiting somewhere outside, his eyes fixed on the door, his heart pacing in rhythm with hers. The last thing she remembered before the anesthesia took her was whispering his name, Balto. When she woke, everything was quiet again, but not dark. There was pressure in her head, a blur behind her eyelids. She heard the steady beeping of a monitor and the muffled sound of someone's footsteps. The voice that spoke was gentle, cautious. "Claire, don't try to open your eyes yet. We'll remove the bandages soon." Days passed in half-dreams. Sometimes she heard Balto's bark echoing in her mind, sometimes the sound of wind over snow, sometimes the piano, the way it used to sound before everything ended. She clung to those sounds like prayers. Then one morning, Dr. Avery returned. "Are you ready?" she asked softly. Claire nodded. The bandages came away slowly. The first sliver of light stabbed her eyes like a blade. She gasped, her hands flying to her face. Tears filled her vision before she could even see what she was crying for. "Breathe," the doctor whispered. "Just breathe." Shapes began to form, blurry at first, trembling like smoke. Then colors, soft gold, faint blue. The world she had memorized in sound began to return in trembling fragments. "Can you see?" Claire blinked. The light hurt, but she smiled through it. "I think I can." A week later, they let her go home. The drive back to the mountains felt unreal. She still wore tinted glasses to shield her fragile eyes, but the light, that unbearable, beautiful light, flooded her senses. She saw trees blurring past the window, sunlight scattering on the windshield, and she cried the entire way. When the car stopped, she heard it first, the bark she had dreamed of in every dark hour. Then the thud of paws, the heavy exhale of breath, the sound of claws skidding across wood as Balto ran to her. "Easy, boy," she whispered, stepping out, her cane tapping against the gravel. Then she lowered the glasses, blinking against the brightness. And there he was. Balto stood in the sunlight, fur streaked with white, one ear bent, eyes the color of frozen lakes. He looked older than she remembered, but so strong, so impossibly alive. Claire dropped to her knees, tears spilling down her cheeks. "You're real," she whispered, laughing through her sobs. "You're so real." He pressed his head into her chest, and for the first time in more than a year, she saw the world. Really saw it. Not the way she had before, through perfection and symmetry, but through something raw and sacred. Months passed. Summer came, warm and endless. Claire moved into a small cottage near town, close to the rehab center. She began working with dogs, helping train them for people who had lost what she once did. Balto stayed by her side through every session, watching, guiding, patient as ever. Sometimes people would recognize her from the news, the blind pianist and her hero dog, but she never liked the title. "I wasn't the hero," she always said. He was. At night, when the world grew quiet, she still played the piano. Her vision was partial. Sometimes the room blurred into nothing. Sometimes light fractured into stars. But she didn't need sight to find the keys anymore. Balto always lay beside her bench, head resting on her foot, as she played the melody she'd written after the accident. Slow, aching, and full of hope. She called it "The Light She Can Feel." One evening, as the last orange light of sunset spilled through the window, Claire finished playing and turned toward Balto. He was watching her, eyes soft, body still. She smiled, her voice trembling. "You saved me twice," she whispered. "Once when I couldn't see, And once when I was too afraid to try. Balto's tail thumped once against the floor. Then he lowered his head into her lap. She stroked his fur, listening to the sound of his breath. It was slower now, gentler. The breath of an old friend finally at peace. The room was quiet except for the ticking of the clock and the whisper of the evening wind. She leaned close and said softly, "If you ever have to go, it's okay. You've already shown me everything I needed to see." The years that followed were kind to her. Claire's sight faded again, slowly, gently, like a candle burning down to its last glow. But this time, she didn't fight it, because she had learned that sight was never about light. It was about love, memory, and faith. When people asked her later if she missed seeing, she would smile and say, "No, I still see, just differently." And when she played the piano, she could always feel him there. The echo of paws on the floor, the warmth beside her legs, the heartbeat that had once guided her through the dark. She couldn't see the world when he found her, but through him, she learned to see everything that truly mattered. If this story made you feel something, hope, pain, or faith, hit subscribe right now, because tomorrow's story might touch your heart even deeper. Drop a comment and tell us where you're watching from, and share this video with someone who still believes that miracles find us, even in the dark.